On today's show, yeah, the San Diego Padres are losers.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every...
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, May 16th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, and best believe that will be true for today's episode, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my baseball-related work over at justbaseball.com, where I write about not just the ever so lowly and stinky and pathetic Padres, but also general baseball stuff. I also have another podcast called Baseball vs. the World, where we do all sorts of funny, evergreen kind of baseball topics. So go check that out. And check me out on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. On today's show, we are unfortunately talking about the Padres. Unfortunately. I wish that I could just sit here and all of you would be down to hear me talk about comic books that I've read recently. Perhaps you'd like to hear my thoughts on certain foods, some cooking that your boy has been doing, trying to learn new recipes. I wish I could talk about that. Frankly, I think a lot of you in your everyday lives, listeners and viewers of this podcast, wish that you could just do that and completely ignore and forget, like the Men in Black flash laser thing, what happened in this series. But unfortunately, as we all are in this current system that we have, we got a job to do. And in this case, it's my job to talk about the Padres. So unfortunately, that's what we'll be doing today. We'll be recapping yesterday's, I guess what you could call a baseball game. And then talking a little bit more about what it means and what it says about the Padres as a whole, including some new numbers I dug up for y'all and just what's wrong with this team. I literally on the side put only in the notes. For those who don't follow the YouTube, I highly recommend doing it for today because there's some little Easter eggs. Tatis has turned his back on the camera. You know? Pac-Man as well. And the little show notes I made really dumb because that's what the Padres are right now. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by GameTime, though. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONONLY for $20 off your first purchase. Here's the thing, I'm not going to lie to you. Game recap's going to be short, so let's just get it over with now. The big thing in this game, Padres lose by a score of 8-0. Because one of the things that usually helps in baseball is that when you're struggling and you're trying to salvage a series, you should make that the series that you actually perform the worst in. Michael King, famously, elite start against the Dodgers last week, and that cannot be taken away from him. 7 innings, only 2 hits, no runs, 3 walks, 11 Ks. So many whiffs on all his pitches. He had like 18 whiffs or something in that game against the Dodgers lineup that already has 3 players that we know are going to the Hall of Fame, and Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, and then just some all-star players like your, what's his name? What's that dude's name? Teoscar Hernandez, for example. He does well there and decides that this is actually the perfect time, with the Padres having lost 2 straight games to one of the worst teams in baseball, not just this year, but from the past several years. And he decides, I'm going to stink in today's game. 5 1/3, giving up 6 earned runs on 8 hits, 2 walks, 7 Ks. The 7 strikeouts is also really emblematic of Michael King's season. He gets strikeouts. Even in some of his bad starts, he's managing to get strikeouts. He even got some whiffs. His changeup looked pretty good today. The pitch mix, however, still needs work. And most importantly, he keeps getting hit really hard, I should say. In this game, most of the damage coming against him from the early innings with Jordan Beck having the game of his life. I would venture to guess that many of you listening to this podcast have probably never heard of Jordan Beck before. That's because he's a rookie and because he's not necessarily a highly touted rookie. In fact, heading into today's game, Jordan Beck had let's see if I get this right here. He had a -4 WRC plus. -4 WRC plus, hitting 191 with a 191 on base and a 213 slugging across 14 games this season. I know it's 14 games, but I just want to illustrate that. He not only gets a bunch of RBIs in this game, but he also gets a home run. Specifically, just to give you the full breakdown of his game, Jordan Beck, who I must repeat, -4 WRC plus in 14 games this season across 47 plate appearances heading into this game against the Padres, a guy who just shuts down the Dodgers. 3 for 5, 5 RBIs, a double, and a home run. I'm going to read it again. The San Diego Padres record against the Colorado Rockies since 2021, each year. Right? Each year. 8-11, 9-10, 9-4 last year. Congrats, guys. The year that you managed to be one of the least clutch teams of all time, you at least managed to finally show up against one of the worst teams in baseball. And then this year, 2-5. 2-4. Or, no, I think it's 2-5, actually. 2-5. I don't know really where to start. I'm just going to say with Michael King, this has been the problem all season. This is the number one piece in return for Juan Soto. However, I'll give him a little bit of a break. This is a Padres bashing episode, don't get me wrong. In fairness, Drew Thorpe was used in the trade for Dylan Cease, so you can kind of view it in that lens. That's fine. But just on face value, if they don't do that trade, let's say they don't do that trade, your best return for this has been a guy who has been the epitome of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This guy is Two-Face. This guy is Adam Warlock when he heads bad in the Marvel Comics. For those who don't know, there's some funny lore with him where basically he starts out good, but then the longer he's alive, he turns bad. So it's he will go completely south very quickly. There is really no excuse for this. And frankly, players were even saying that after the game. Mike Shildt said he's not worried. There isn't the sky isn't falling in the clubhouse, which frankly, Mike, I don't really know what else should be happening. I don't know. I'm not saying the sky should be falling, but I feel like something should be happening. You just beat the Dodgers and then you got swept and made the Rockies look like the 1927 Yankees. So there's that. Xander Bogaerts said, yeah, this is if you don't want them to boo, then you have to play better. Thank you, Xander. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that as someone who hates booing. I think it's stupid and counterproductive. I've said this many times. I think it's dumb. I really do. I'm not faulting people who boo, though. I just think as a concept that I'm just it's not for me. So I take that back a little bit. I don't mean to be mean to people who are booing and whatnot because they've earned it, this Padres team. Michael King said basically the same thing along the lines, we have to be better, all that stuff. I have not seen, genuinely, and as someone who really hates the recency bias and the hyperbole that plagues the sports media industry, which I could do 7 podcasts about, and how it's not just people who are I want to be hyperbolic to get followers. It's a lot deeper than that, although that is a big component. I have not seen a sports team hate its fan base more than this incarnation of the San Diego Padres. And by incarnation, I mean the past few years. Let's say since I've been hosting the show. There have been teams that have had worse things. Don't get me wrong. There have been teams with no playoff appearances, no NLCS appearances across all the sports. But when you consider that it is literally good for baseball, what the Padres have been doing, spending money, even though you're a small market, getting fans excited, being top in attendance every year, in a league full of teams that have much better farm systems, much better training staff, much better organizational fortitude, frankly, and they don't spend, and they never win the World Series, and that's bad for the sport. That's why you get things like John Fisher, who's literally making the A's a minor league team as we speak. And the rest of the owners are okay with that. The Padres are the hope for the league in this regard. And I know that sounds like I'm biased, but in this case, I really do think it's true. It is good for the league, what they're doing if they succeed. They sell out all these games, and what do? They don't show up. This tweet from @2MitchMortons, which he tweeted, I believe, before yesterday's game. Padres home and away splits. Home or away, they're hitting 285, 344, 412. That's their slash line. Home, 229, 305, 392. So you get all these people who show up, and I don't care if it's a hitter-friendly ballpark. I really don't care. I don't care. I understand it's a hitter-friendly ballpark, but when you have the talent that this team does, for you to just continually see all these people standing up, cheering your name, it shows that these players, this organization, this management staff, whatever it is, cannot do well when the brights are lightest. That's what it shows you. Can they show up? I don't know if I've said this on a podcast. I literally think that the Padres have a better chance, and this doesn't make sense, but hear me out. I don't care. I'm mad. I think they have a better chance at winning the World Series than making the playoffs. I know that makes no sense, but I imagine some of you know what I'm talking about. That is, if this team made it to the postseason, that they've shown they can turn it on. The Cardinals series, the series against the Dodgers from not so long ago, the series against the Mets, right? 2 100-win teams. They're the type of team that can get spicy and get fiery in the playoffs. But they just refuse to be consistent and give us a position where we think they're going to make it. They're now 2 games below 500. I don't necessarily care about the record in a vacuum because, again, they still have a wild card spot. But the fact that this is when you should be turning it on. Why do the Kansas City Royals have a better record than you? Why do the Detroit Tigers, who have been rebuilding since I was in high school, have a better record than you? Why have they figured it out? And by the way, the Detroit Tigers don't have an offense. So you want to say, oh, well, this is what happens when you're a one-sided team. The Padres have been bad, when it comes to the pitching. Well, the Detroit Tigers don't have that situation. They're actually 1 game below 500, so whatever. Kansas City Royals is a better example. But you get my point. Padres are really good on offense this year. Why is it that can't be enough to at least make them not horrible against one of the worst organizations in all of sports? I just don't understand. I don't understand. The Padres have, and I tweeted this yesterday, Jurickson Profar, who's one of the best players in Major League Baseball, has one of the best on-base percentages, one of the best WRC pluses. They got him for $1 million. Every team would kill to have that kind of value. And that's not even what was supposed to determine whether you were going to be good this year. That was just a nice little, we'll give this a shot. He stepped up. Jake Cronenworth has turned into Freddie Freeman. You have a Rookie of the Year contender, a candidate in Jackson Merrill, who frankly sometimes looks like he cares more about this team than veterans who've been in the sport for a long time. He gets amped over like a catch he makes in the outfield. It's like he's trying to feel like he plays on a team that has some sense of urgency. You have a Cy Young candidate in Dylan Cease, and you literally lead Major League Baseball in WRC plus in high leverage situations. But you're finding new ways to lose. It's amazing. It's amazing. And we're not done yet, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, no. And we got to talk about Machado and the rest of this team for sure, ladies and gentlemen. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you about something that doesn't make me super frustrated and make me want to turn into just like a cartoon where the smoke blows out of your ears, right? That is our good friends over at GameTime, folks. And when it comes to GameTime, got the NBA playoffs going on. Maybe you want to catch that next Knicks game? Maybe. The Knicks have been like the cool bee's knees team. Everyone likes the the Knicks these days. So maybe you could get tickets to that. Or maybe you could get tickets to the next Mavericks game. I don't know, whatever. Or if you're feeling really masochistic, you can try them out for the next Padres game. That's right, as they will be playing against the Atlanta Braves. That's a big series, right? So that should be a lot of fun, guys. But in all seriousness, they are really great. They have all sorts of flash zone deals, last minute ticket deals. They show you the picture of where you're sitting. If you're a visual learner like myself, that will show you just what it looks like from that view. And also, they have all these event cancellation protections. If you find seats in the area, they'll give you credit backwards for that, and you can get those new seats. They've got all sorts of deals for you guys. Last minute tickets, it's true with GameTime. I bought tickets on there before last time I went to a baseball game, and it is fantastic. And because you are listening to this, folks, let me tell you, GameTime, they got a deal for you. You download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but create an account, remember, and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Go check it out. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the Locked On Ranting podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Javier Reyes. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts from, including YouTube, where you can see me. Maybe the smoke will blow out my ears, so you want to tune in for the visual of that. It might happen. Who knows? Hey, I know some trickery when it comes to the video. I'm doing something right now in the video. That's what it feels like to be a Padres fan. What am I referring to? You have to tune into the video to find out. That's right, folks. In terms of the rest of the thing, though, the struggles of the stars in this Padres team, and we've discussed this before, and I just mentioned in the tweet that I mentioned, which is that you're literally hitting better with runners in scoring position this year. And it has nothing to do with like some of the best players on the team. Right? For the most part. You've gotten Jurickson Profar and Jake Cronenworth to be amazing. You've got Jackson Merrill to be amazing. And frankly, there are tangible things that have been better on this team. Heck, Donovan Solano has been great for this team. I forgot to mention him because frankly, I don't even want to talk about the minutia of yesterday's game, but he went 3 for 4 yesterday with a walk. I saw some people saying, oh, well, you're just going to bench Arise. I actually don't mind that at all because I think that Arise isn't some like superstar player necessarily. And I think they say if we don't like the matchup, we got Solano, and look at him. He actually had a good game. 2 for 3 with a walk. Like, really good game from him. Xander Bogaerts, by the way, I will mention, before we rip him, 1 for 4 in this game. Did get a little bit robbed. Hit 1 ball in the 5th inning. 670 expected batting average. It didn't end up being a hit. So I just wanted to throw that out there. 100.6 miles per hour off the bat. Like, he's been hitting the ball slightly better lately. I just want to throw that out there. He could have been 2 for 4 easily. But when it comes to this team, I think that one of the issues is that, and as many people responded to that tweet of mine, saying the problem is that the Padres superstars like Machado, Bogaerts, Tatis are struggling, and you've got guys, assistant to the junior GM at DD Keeling said, don't pull your punches. They're 2 games below 500 because Manny and Xander are pumpkins, which is true. But I do think that while that is true, I think that there's so much more to it, though. And we're going to get into that as the show progresses, but they just, like, you can't give this team any benefit of the doubt, like, anymore, forever. Seriously. Unless they make it to the playoffs, until then, guys, I'm not kidding when I say this. If they swept the Atlanta Braves this weekend, I'm not going to be jumping for joy necessarily. Because they can just as easily after that drop. I think they play like a not-so-great team on paper after that. Who is it? I forgot who the Padres play. Sorry. My apologies. I'm pulling it up right now. After the Braves, they play the Reds. Then they play the Yankees, who's tough. And you know damn well that Juan Soto is going to absolutely demolish them. You know damn well it's going to happen already. Then they play the Marlins. Like, they could sweep the Braves, get swept by the Reds, sweep the Yankees, and they could swept by the Marlins. And I would be no surprise if they did that. It's incredible what this team does. And Jurickson Profar, look, he's been one of the best players in baseball, frankly. Like, I've already talked about that in high leverage situations this year. He's been among not just the best on the Padres, but he's hitting .625, which is the second best in all of baseball. Better than names like Salvador Perez, Kyle Tucker, Michael Harris, Jesse Winker. I don't know why I said him, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr., like, he's been really good. He's been amazing. And the fact that, like, if he was bad for the rest of the season, you still got him for $1 million, he's literally already worth it based on that's how good he's been this year. And for you to waste it is just flat out impressive. Flat out impressive. And in terms of the Padres specifically, I'm just going to read you guys the numbers before we get into the rest of the stars on this team. In high leverage situations this year, Jurickson Profar is hitting .625. Fernando Tatis Jr. is hitting .385. Jackson Merrill's hitting .300. Ha-Seong Kim, same thing for last year, by the way. Got to shout out Ha-Seong Kim hitting .273. Luis Campusano hitting .250. That's probably because of the, when 2 nights ago when he messed up with the bases loaded, so he probably suffered there. Jake Cronenworth's hitting .200. Xander Bogaerts 182. Manny Machado 167. Those two are literally the exact same as they were last year when it comes to high leverage situations. It's unbelievable. If you want to go by WRC+, Manny Machado has a 44 in high leverage situations. And Xander Bogaerts has a 5. A 5. One of the things that I want to mention is that a lot of people got on me a little bit when I said I didn't think that it was a must to extend Manny Machado. Now, 2 things. First of all, I don't know how much the elbow injury is plaguing him. I want to believe that it is, but the other thing about that is how long was the elbow injury affecting him? Because this was also last year. He has not only been bad in the clutch and stepping up this year. Since he signed his contract extension with the Padres, his life career-wise with the Padres was a 131 WRC+. Ever since he signed that extension, it might have gone down 1 or 2 points, but it was a 108 WRC+. So that's counting last year and then this year and then every year before that, including a season when he wasn't very good that first year with the Padres, including that season, still a 131 WRC+, the aggregate. hitting about 280, 350 on base. Great star-level player. And then he signs that extension and falls apart. Now, yes, the elbow could be why this is happening. But, how long has this been an issue? Because this dates back to the beginning of last year. You remember last year when he grounded into like 6 double plays in a week? Oh, I remember that. I wrote an article over at Just Baseball about it. Xander Bogaerts, he also wasn't very good in the clutch last year, but he at least did have the excuse of the fact that he was on fire to start the year. We're all tweeting that cliche tweet that says Xander Bogaerts is a San Diego Padre with a picture of him or just a highlight of what he did. We all did it. We're all guilty of it. It's fine. And then he gets hit by the Spencer Strider fastball, falls off for a while, but then he rebounds in the second half with a 130 WRC plus, and he starts hitting the ball really well. He's got a 300 batting average. He's even slugging the ball a little bit, so at least the hitting skills were there. What is Manny Machado doing right now? He doesn't have an excuse in terms of the majority of last year. If you told me that the elbow thing has been plaguing him since the beginning of last year, that's one thing, but I doubt it, because then I feel like we would have known about it earlier. At least I think we would have. He just isn't showing up. 3 strikeouts, by the way. 3 strikeouts. So let's just talk about this series real quick for Manny Machado. We got to just mention this. Manny Machado in this series, on top of the grounding into double plays and not coming up big in that first game when the team needed him, where even Xander Bogaerts managed to get a home run, by the way. On top of that, right? 2 outs, runners in scoring position. He was unable to get it done. And then, of course, as I mentioned, first pitch, grounded to double play. We could relitigate and we could argue whether or not he should have swung at that pitch. That's a whole nother thing. I personally don't think so. I would have taken one, and it wasn't like it was right down the middle. It was a little bit low. Would have been a strike, but I would have waited because my thing was this guy was clearly nervous and might have thrown a wild pitch quite literally in the next pitch. How does he follow that up? Oh, he grounds into 2 more double plays the next day, both on the first pitch. Now, don't get me wrong. That's so bad that it's like that's almost a little fluky, but bottom line, it's what happened. And then how does he follow up the end of the series? 3 strikeouts. No hits. Xander Bogaerts, same sort of thing. But the difference is I don't know what's going on with him because allegedly one of the things that we were hopeful for him for was that the overall batting skills showed up more in that season, especially at the beginning and then at the end in the second half, even though they were eliminated, which, by the way, yes, that is worth bringing up that, yeah, in September, October, when Bogaerts was going absolutely nuts, it's like, congrats. You know what I mean? Like, we're like on the, teetering on being eliminated and he decides to show up finally. This Padres team is just a mess. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics. I know that I have just been ranting this episode, but guys, I don't know what else to say at this point. I do have some numbers, though, that I want to share with you guys when it comes to being clutch and when it comes to just maybe a little bit of a silver lining for this team. And I know you guys don't probably want to hear that, but you know what? I'm going to say it anyway. And also, I want to say this one joke. My mom, heading into yesterday's game, was just like, hey, I know we're bad against the Rockies, but Michael King just got here, so maybe the Rockies curse doesn't affect him. He shouldn't be part of it. Well, sorry, Mom, but unfortunately, welcome to baseball. Welcome to baseball. And we're going to get into a little bit of the overall issues with this team and the front office in just a second, guys. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about another one of our favorite sponsors. Those are our friends over at FanDuel. Just like I was mentioning with GameTime, we got NBA playoffs going around. We've got obviously baseball. Hopefully you're not watching the Padres as much as you can. And then of course you've got WNBA just started up. We've got the NHL playoffs. We'll probably have something else coming up soon. Whatever. I imagine everybody's getting into football futures now. All that sort of stuff. Go check them out. It's winner take all. And FanDuel has got you covered. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. Just $5. $150 in bonus bets. Sounds like quite the deal because it is. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, over-unders, player props, whatever you want to your heart's content. FanDuel has you covered, man, because they for the fans, man. They're for all the duelists out there, and they're all for the fans out there. And if you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, they can make that happen with that booster for you guys. So go check that out. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Go check them out. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are thankfully almost done with today's edition of the Locked On Ranting Padres podcast. Of course, as always, guys, your team every day. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it very much. Even if the Padres don't appreciate you, don't worry. I appreciate you. I appreciate that you tune in and you get into those seats of yours. Maybe you're on the road, driving your trucks or whatever, or maybe you're just in class, or maybe you're even at work. You're just bored, whatever it is. I am here for you. I will always be here. I will at least show up and do the show. Here's the thing. Some people respond to my tweet going, hey, well, they have the worst manager in the league. I don't think, if we're just going to take this from a very scientific standpoint, I don't think that you just get unlucky with your sixth manager. I just don't think that happens. And by the way, who's hiring them? So if you really do think that Mike Shildt or Bob Melvin or Bud Black or Ant Green or Jace Tingler are awful managers, then why aren't we blaming the guy who's hiring them? And frankly, as my opinion, watching sports, I think that there is a great fallacy where people keep assuming that, so let's use football, for example. The Browns just keep missing on quarterback. Statistically, that's insane. Go look up Cleveland Browns quarterback history. You cannot tell me that they just happen to have missed disastrously on the last 27 quarterbacks they've taken. Think about that. By law of averages, one of them should have turned out good. So that tells you it might be the GM or it might be ownership. We know with the Padres it ain't ownership because this ownership is spending more than the team has spent probably in the last 50 years combined, right? So it's not ownership. And it can't be manager because they keep getting new managers every other year. Bob Melvin, under A.J. Preller, had the most regular season wins of any A.J. Preller season, and he was gotten rid of because of all you can't fix the relationship. It's untenable. So we're really going to start saying now it's Shildt? Now it's Shildt. No, it's not, guys. It's A.J. Preller and this front office and this organization as a whole. And I think that it is that reason why, rightfully, both fans and some friends of mine who cover general baseball were like, I don't trust this Padres team. I know the numbers. You know what I mean? I know that they were bad at runners in scoring position last year. They were historically bad, very bad. One of the worst teams of the entire century, which we're going to get into in 1 second. I understand. Hey, you know what? Manny Machado was hurt a little bit. He's coming off the elbow surgery. Maybe that explains it. Xander Bogaerts had his wrist hurt. Tatis isn't going to be bad 2 years in a row. He'll figure it out. All the hard hit data's there, right? He hits the crap out of the ball. You know? He's fast. He won a platinum glove. This team will be better. It's got to be better. And I know people who were like, yeah, but there's something wrong. And what is wrong is something that I can't, for you guys, trace by stats. It's only by feeling and reports and journalism that we get from The Athletic, the San Diego Union Tribune, other anonymous places, whatever. And they tell us, we don't trust this team. The Padres literally acquired the two things that they needed, and they didn't do what we were all complaining about in the preseason, which was, why are you signing Tommy Pham? Well, sign Eddie Rosario, sign Brandon Belt, sign whoever. Or let's go sign Michael Lorenzen. Let's go trade for Lucas Giolito or Shane Bieber, whatever. They did even better than that. They got Luis Arraez, who's a two-time batting champion in the American League and National League, which I'm pretty sure only one other player in the history of baseball has done. And for the record, he has been good. He's hitting .310, got a .390 on base. He's been good. He's doing his job. With the Padres. And they also got Donovan Solano. So they added the bats, and they added Dylan Cease. And yet, I bet all of us are looking and saying, wow, we need another pitcher and we need another bat. That is not a sign of a well-run team that you literally add players who are producing for you and then other guys fall into the pits of Tartarus. That's the problem. This team is never firing on all cylinders. Never. I promise you, I will not be surprised if Manny Machado turns into the Hulk, hits 4 home runs this weekend, and then Jurickson Profar craters, Jake Cronenworth craters, Jackson Merrill craters. Oh, well, the bullpen's been great. Robert Suarez. Well, guess what? Enyel De Los Santos and Yuki Matsui struggle. Remember the 9-4 loss to the Rockies? It's never everyone can be on the same page. And it's never that if a player falls off, it's like, oh, Machado's just, he's okay. He's hitting like 250, 330 on base. He's got like a 110 WRC plus. He hasn't been great. Same thing with Xander, but they're producing. It's never that. It's that what I mentioned before with the 4 WRC plus that Xander Bogaerts has in high leverage situations. And those things is what I talked about preseason as being something that doesn't usually translate. You don't get that bad with runners on base, especially on an individual player standpoint, year after year. It doesn't usually continue. But so far, the Padres are finding a way to prove history wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Let's also look at general clutch ratings. I went through and looked at every team's clutch rating, which is something that FanGraphs puts together, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Runners on base, all that stuff. And they have their own clutch rating statistic. When it comes to teams in clutch rating, I looked at every year since I was born. So not just the turn of century, since I was born, because I'm extra like that. So 1996. The Padres had a minus 8.95 clutch rating last year. Minus 0.895, which is, of course, atrocious. Atrocious. You guys know that, okay? And the second closest team last year for them in that clutch rating was, let me just make sure I pull this up again, the Toronto Blue Jays, 5.3. That was when I was looking at, one of the greatest discrepancies between the worst in clutch and the second worst in clutch that I have seen in these past 20 years. But there were teams that were actually less clutch than the Padres. Let's check them out. 2018 Dodgers, they had a negative 8.97 clutch rating, but they still finished with 92 wins. The 2016 Twins had a negative 9.54 run differential. They were terrible, but they went 85-77 the next year. And then the 2005 Cleveland, formerly known as Indians, negative 8.18 clutch rating. They finished 93-69 that year. So let's look at the Dodgers and Twins there, or the Dodgers and Cleveland for a second there. Both of those teams still managed to be good despite not being very clutch because they are fundamentally better built organizations. The Cleveland is still annoying and they never spend money, don't get me wrong. And we know the Dodgers are a better organization, even if their fan base overstates them and acts like they run everything, right? They don't. Stop it. You don't run anything. You can't have one World Series win in a 60-game season where you got to duck the Padres because their top two starters were out and then act like that makes up for the fact that you're basically the Peyton Manning, James Harden, Dallas Cowboys of the sport, right? Enough. But then you look at that 2016 Twins team, which is kind of why I was optimistic about this team. Yes, they finished horrible that year. They had negative 9.54 clutch rating that year, which is awful. That's even worse than the Padres was last year. And then the next year they went 85-77. That kind of speaks to what I've been saying, which is that these things usually rebound. So that is my positivity note, is that if the Padres don't do well this year, it's like we don't have any recent history, at least since I've been born, which is 27 years, of teams doing that. Not only being that bad with the clutch rating, like the Dodgers and the and Cleveland, right, where they still managed to have good records because fundamentally their teams were better sound and better built. But then you have these Twins who did make the playoffs next year. So I'm just throwing that out there in terms of that's why I was optimistic about this team. But this team, it is a front office thing that this keeps happening. Everyone yelled at me about not wanting to extend Machado. Not that I didn't want to, but my thing was the only thing they needed to do was extend Juan Soto. Of course, they didn't do that. They extended everybody else under the sun. They signed Xander Bogaerts despite the fact that you had Fernando Tatis Jr. who could play shortstop, you had Jackson Merrill who's playing shortstop in the minors, and you had Ha-Seong Kim who's coming off a Gold Glove nomination, and you decided, you know what, I need another shortstop. That way, we are locked in, and we can't move this infield around that much. Jake Cronenworth, who's great at second base, he's now at first base, and he's been amazing there, but I'm just throwing it out there that he's been a lot better at second. It's just beyond comprehension, man. And I still believe they can be good. The talent is through the roof. As I've mentioned many times, they have too many things that are better. They are first in the league in WRC plus in high leverage situations. It is a complete role reversal. And they are still finding ways to drop dumb games. They looked dead in this last one. Dead. I was like, what's going on here? It's just unbelievable what this team does. And I genuinely mean it. I have not seen a team that seems to hate how much their fans want to love them. I have not seen it. There are teams that have been really beloved and had a lot of goodwill for them, but not teams that are second in attendance, or all of a sudden they had an increase of spending of $150 million. It's almost like Machado and Bogaerts are actively annoyed that the Padres dared to actually try and pay, and you're just making everyone look bad now. And don't get me wrong, I will still be there fighting against the people who say this is why you don't spend a free agency. Because those people are dumb and those people are really uneducated and they are just smooth-brained about all this stuff. And they look at the one Royals team that was good, or they look at all these teams that don't spend and they make the playoffs once, and that for some reason excuses the fact that this is the only sport where winning a championship apparently isn't the goal. It's just to make the playoffs because we like that we have cool farm system guys that we can root for, even though we'll never actually win the whole thing. That being said, if you're one of those people who just doesn't think winning in general is what sports is about, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who do want to win, but for some reason playoffs is good enough, and they've been gaslit by Major League Baseball. I've been talking a lot this episode. I have. And if you're sick of it, do not worry, because on tomorrow's episode, I am going to be joined by Jake Mastriani, the host of Locked On Braves, and believe it or not, the first ever host I had on this podcast. That was way back in the quarantine days. I had Jake on. He was just doing some stuff for Fansided, writing about the Padres, writing about the Braves, writing about every baseball team, frankly. But he's been doing a kick-ass job over at Locked On Braves, and we're going to talk with him about this series. I don't think I'll be as ranting, and at least if you've been annoyed by the ranting, you will get to hear another voice. So don't worry. That is coming on Friday. But yeah, this team's bad, like in the vibes way. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think anymore. They surpass numbers and conventional baseball logic, and not in the good way, except for Profar. Profar is surpassing everything we thought was possible with baseball right now. But other than that, this stuff shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't. But that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, guys. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever your podcast from. Hopefully Tatis and Pac-Man, if you're watching the video, will turn around for tomorrow's episode. Remember, crossover Jake Mastriani tomorrow. Look forward to that. But until next time, stay safe. And of course, I guess, stay faithful. My five faithful homies. Take care.